Hey everyone, and welcome to a new video, and hey to Lee who actually requested this video. So Lee messaged me on Discord asking if there's a way to get sort of like a GTA style enter vehicle, exit vehicle. Now obviously for us to have a nice smooth climbing into the vehicle, sitting in the car, driving around and getting out of the car, that's going to require more models, some animations, having the vehicle model to have opening and closing doors. Now I don't have the luxury of all of those items in this instance, so I've obviously stripped it down to a simpler version, which I think will be more accessible for a lot more people. But anyway, just a quick example of what we're going to do. So in this example, we've got a third person character. We can just run around. Everything functions as you'd expect from the third person template. But as you can see, we've got a vehicle. That's also from the vehicle template. And if we go over to it and hit the E key, we get in the car. We get full functionality as you'd expect from the vehicle. But if we hit the E key one more time, we then get out of the vehicle and we can continue running around as you'd expect. So, and then you can get back in obviously and do whatever you want to do. That's what we're going to cover today. So hopefully that'll be useful for quite a few of you. It's fairly straightforward. There's a few steps, but Lee's quite new to the Unreal Engine, so I'm going to go over a few more basic steps, but hopefully that should still be enjoyable for the majority of us. So let me open up a new project and I'll see you shortly. Okay, so as you can see, I've just opened up a brand new third person template. Now we are going to need some space to drive around, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my top down view, and I'm just going to select a random item from my outliner and press F so we're in the actual area. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the floor, which is going to be this large area here. I'm going to change the size of this to 50 by 50 to give us a bit more room to breathe. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. I'm going to select my wall, hit the R key. That's going to put me in scale mode. I can scale this wall down to the edge. Again, I'm going to pick the bottom one, scale this all the way to the edge, move back to the translate tool, which is W, and scroll that down. Again for this wall, one sec, I've selected too many things there. For this wall, move it over to this edge, hit R, scale it down, and then again I'm going to select this wall and scale it down just so we've got a full arena. Now what I'm also going to do for the luxury of the game is I'm going to select this little ramp here. I'm going to hold control and I'm going to select all of these actors at the same time, and I'm going to drag this over here a little bit, going into the rotate tool, which is E key, rotating this around, and if we get this working properly we can use that as a ramp to jump. So I'm going to go back to perspective mode, and you can see these are the changes that we've made. What I am going to do quickly, knowing that this ramp isn't big enough for us to jump over this cylinder, I'm just going to press the R key and scale this up a little bit just to give us a bit of a better ramp for our vehicle. But that's it for now. So at the moment we've just got a larger area, so let's add the vehicle to it. Now that's really simple in here, because what we can do is we can press add. We can add a feature pack or content pack, so we'll press that. Now this enables you to add features from all of the other templates, but as we're talking about vehicles, we're going to select vehicle in this instance and add that to our project. That'll freeze just for, well, it might not freeze for you, but on my machine it does. It freezes for a sec as it adds all those assets. Now my head's in the way. Let me see if I can move me over. Whoa. So you can see here on the screen, we've got this notification. You've got a plugin missing. You need the Chaos vehicle plugin. Now, if this message pops up for you, what I want you to do is press enable. That'll ask you to then restart the engine. Now, I've had it a couple of times where this message hasn't popped up, so I'm just going to dismiss that for now, and I'm just going to show you how to add it if that message doesn't appear for you. So we're going to go to edit, plugins, and you want to type in chaos and then vehicle, and you can see here we've got the chaos vehicle plugin experimental. We're going to enable that. It's going to give you a warning this way telling you that it is experimental and that it could crash your engine. Just hit yes and you'll see that it's going to ask you to restart. So hit restart. We're going to save the changes because that's us moving the arena around. Hit save, and what should happen is your engine should restart. Perfect opportunity for a drink. Okay, so the engine's restarted now, so we can close this little panel, and I think we should be good to go, to be honest. So what I'm going to do, first and foremost, I'm going to drag our vehicle out, and you'll notice straight away something seems to be a little bit wrong. For whatever reason, when you add the content pack, everything's not set up 100% out of the gate. So you can't just press play now and drive around. But don't worry, we can fix that. But the first thing we need to do is make our vehicle appear. So let's open up this vehicle advance pawn. It's going to tag this to the top here. Go to the viewport, and as you can see, we don't have a vehicle. So over on the left, underneath the components, there's actually a mesh, and it's called vehicle mesh. But for some reason, it doesn't load with this assigned. So let's just select skeletal mesh asset. And if you scroll down, you should see sports car. So I'm going to select that. And now you can see that the vehicle loads in as you'd expect. So I'm going to hit compile. I'm just going to nip back to my map, and you can see now that that has loaded, and I think we're actually underground a little bit. So I'm going to lift this up, and I'm going to press the end key on my keyboard, and that's just going to drop it down to where it's touching the floor just enough. And if we hit play, you can see now that you might not have seen it, but it did jiggle around a little bit as the chaos physics engine sort of works out the suspension and all that sort of stuff. So that's in the game. It's not working, but it's visible. So let's make some changes to the vehicle, so then it can tell when we're nearby, which then gives us the ability to then enter the vehicle or not. So let's go to our advanced pawn, and what we want to do is we want to set up a sort of a box around it which will detect when our player's near the vehicle. So with your mesh selected, go to add and type in box col, and you should get this box collision being the only option. We'll select that. I'm going to change the box extent to, I think, maybe 100 by 175, I think was a nice number for me. I'm just going to switch to the front view, and I'm just going to lift that up to a point where it's midway of the wheels. That's not super critical, but you know, I quite like that. And effectively the space that it's given us on each side of the vehicle is effectively the area which your character would need to stand for you to be able to enter the vehicle. Now if you do want your player to enter the vehicle from anywhere around the vehicle, what you can do is just make that a lot bigger, just like that, and you could be stood anywhere around that vehicle and you'll be able to enter it. I don't want to do that. I want to limit it to where you have to at least be near the doors of the vehicle, and that's fine for me. Now one other thing, we're going to have to get out of the vehicle, so we need sort of like a position, an exit point if you will, for us to get out of. So with the box selected that you've just added, which to be honest we should probably rename that to like player detection, something like that. But with your collision box enabled, sorry, not enabled, selected, press add and we'll type in scene. Now this is a scene component, we want the bottom one, and we're really going to use this just as a sort of positional item. The scene component doesn't really do anything, it doesn't really have a lot of functionality behind it, but what it is good for is it has a location, so we can use that as sort of a position point. And is that on the ground? I think it is. Let's move it up. So what I've done there is I've just put that at the side of the vehicle, and I'll use that as my position for when I exit the vehicle, which we'll get to, but that's just all set up now. So we've got the vehicle set up, we've got a collision box to detect when we're around, and we've got a place to exit the vehicle. And again, I'm just going to rename this scene component to exit point. Exit point. Perfect. Okay, so before we set up the how to get in the vehicle, we would just want to set up an interaction state for the player. So I'm going to go back to my folders now, go back to the content folder, and I tell you what, for this example, I'm just going to remove my second content rather. So we're going to go back to the content folder, third person in my case, or if you're using a first person, go to your first person folder, blueprints, and then just select your character blueprint. So for me, third person blueprint. Okay, great. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to set up the E key in my example. So E, keyboard, and if we scroll down, we should find the E key. E key, there we go. Now, what you could do is you could find the enhanced mapping context. You can go to this, and you can create up a mapping and add sort of enter vehicle in there, or interact would be the proper way to do it. That takes a few more minutes, so I'm just going to skip that in my example. I have a video on context mapping, or the enhanced input system, so if you're interested in how to set that up properly, if I remember, I'll put a card up above shortly, and you can watch that and do that correctly. But just for a shortcut, I'm just going to hard code the E key, and then what we need to do is we need to send out a signal, or we need to tell anything that hey, we're trying to interact with something. If you're interested, do something. So for this, I'm just going to use an event dispatcher. So over on the left hand side, right at the bottom, we can add an event dispatcher, and I'm going to call this interact. I'm going to drag that out, and what we want to do is we want to call it, and effectively this is going to be like shout out, broadcast, tell everybody I want to interact. And in just a few minutes, we're going to set up what's called like a listener, and that's somebody listening out. If I hear somebody wanting to interact and I've got something that I can interact with, then we'll work together. So when we press the E key, we're going to send out a message. If anybody's interested in interacting with me, you can do. So that's pretty much all we need to do at this point in the player. So let's move over to the vehicle now, and let's go to the event graph. So I'm just going to come down to the bottom of the graph just for a bit more room. Now, what we want to do is we want to create a binding, or we want to say when we hear and interact, we want to do something. Now, we can create that binding straight away when we press the play button and just permanently listen out for the interact. However, that means we could probably enter the vehicle from anywhere in the game. But what's probably a good idea is if we use our detection box and we say, well, if the player's inside the box and is wanting to interact, then we'll do something, which we're going to drive the car. So for that, select your box, so select it from your list. Scroll down on the right hand side, and then you should see stuff like begin overlap and end overlap. So when we begin an overlap, so when something enters the box, we want to do something. Now, what we can do is, because I'm using a third person character as my player character, you might have a different one. You might have BP underscore first person if you've took the first person template. You might have something completely random if you're making your own game. We want to effectively cast to whatever your player character is. So when we overlap this box, whatever stood inside the box, which in our case would be our player, is going to be reported on with the other actor node. So what we can do is we can say, let's cast to our player, so in my instance a third person character, and let's say it's not our character entering the box. Let's say an AI walks into this box. What would happen is this would fail. This would only succeed if it's us as the player character enters that box. So this is a good way to check, is this the player or not? If it is the player, do something. If it's not, do something else. But in our case, we want to do something. And what we want to do is we want to say, right, well, now the player's here, listen out for any key presses for interactions. So that's actually called a binding. So bind interact. So bind an event to an interact. And the target's going to be our character, because that's the blueprint or the character with this interact function. So that's appropriate. And then when we hear, or when the interact button's pressed, what do we want to do? Now we want to do a custom event, and we want to drive the car. That's our action. Let's drive this vehicle. Now, when we press play, what actually happens on our character is the player controller, which listens out for any key presses, effectively possesses this character and translates any of our key presses into actions. So it'll listen out for the spacebar being pressed, and it'll say, right, well, for this character, when you press the spacebar, that activates this jump, and then the character jumps. So what we need to do is we need to say, right, now we want to switch from controlling the character to controlling the vehicle. And to do that, we need to tell the player controller to then possess this vehicle rather than possess the sort of character model. So let's get our player controller firstly, and then from the player controller we can say, I want to possess something else. So you can see we've got this possesses function. So when we drive in the car, so when we call this event drive car, we want to possess. What do we want to possess? We actually want to possess, in this terms, self. Oh, if you spell it right. So get a reference to self. Now the reason being is because we're calling this possess node inside our vehicle, and you can see here that the vehicle itself is referred to as self. So we're just saying control the vehicle. So if we hit compile now and actually play, if I'm hitting the E key now, nothing's happening. But if I get close to my car and hit the E key, you can see now that my controller has possessed this vehicle, and then it's detected that this vehicle has this camera and this camera, and just by default it's jumped to the third person, which is absolutely fine. And we've now possessed it. Now the only downside to that is that the player controller still is listening for the key presses that are assigned to a player. So although that I can't send them key presses to my player, they don't translate for a vehicle. So WASD is actively telling walk forward, walk backwards, walk left, walk right. Now obviously a vehicle can't walk left, right and forward and back. So we need to change the mapping context to be vehicle based. So what we can do is, because we've just possessed our car, there's actually a function, or sorry, an event which is called possessed. So whenever this vehicle becomes possessed by something else, let's trigger this. So this would be an appropriate place to put our, let's remove the old controls and let's put in the new controls. So if I remember rightly, we want to do remove mapping. So remove mapping context. And we want to remove it from our player controller. And the context we want to remove. Now typically they're both called default, but I'm looking at the path and I can see third person input. So that's going to be our character. Now I've selected that, I'm actually just going to press this magnifying glass. I'm just going to go in and I'm going to rename it to player. No, that's a bad one. Third person character. Third person character. I'm going to go back, and just while I'm here, I'm just going to select the other one and press the magnifying glass, Oops, I didn't mean to open that. Where are we? And I'm going to change this one to vehicle. Vehicle. So, back to our pawn. We want to remove our third person mapping. And what we want to do is add mapping context. And this is where we want to say, right, we want to add the context of our vehicle. Now, the target again is going to be our player controller. Actually, thinking about it, I don't think that is. So the target is the enhanced input subsystem interface. So actually, this controller is not going to work. We actually need to get the enhanced subsystem. Here we go. So we want to get the subsystem of our player controller. So select that. And our new controller. Yeah, let's just plug that in. Is that going to work? That's not going to work. So we will just simply type in get player. Oh, it was there. There we go. Get player controller. Brilliant. Now, obviously, we need to pin this to that as well. So I'll just add a reroute node there and another reroute node there. So you can double click to add reroute nodes, and that just keeps stuff looking a bit tidier. Yep. So hopefully, when we possess the vehicle, we're going to remove the third person vehicle mapping, and we're going to add in the vehicle mapping. Hit compile and hit play, and let's just give this a test drive. And so you can see now I can drive the vehicle. Now if I'm hitting E now and nothing's happening because we can't actually get out of the vehicle, which is not a good thing. The other bad thing as well is our character's still stood there doing nothing, and I can drive into him. So that's not ideal either. So we need to get rid of the character, and we need to be able to get out of the vehicle. Okay, so let's first and foremost, let's tell the character to become invisible, and let's turn its collisions off so then we can't crash into it. So obviously in this instance we've actually possessed this vehicle, and we've said whenever you've become possessed, do this thing, so change our mapping for us. Now in reality what we can do is we can say to the player event unpossessed. So whenever we lose possession, what we can actually do is we can say let's make ourselves invisible and let's remove our collision so we can't be crashed into. So I'm going to drag off unpossessed, and I'm going to say set response responds to all channels of the capsule. So let's just drag that down. Let's rearrange this. So let's set our collision responses to ignore. But also what we want to do is we want to set visibility. Let's drag that on. Let's set our visibility. Now, obviously, to true or false, we want to set it to false. We want our visibility to be disabled. We don't want to be visible. But what we want to do is we want to propagate this to our children. So what that means is, because our capsule component is sort of like the top level, everything underneath the capsule component, because it's a child, we also want to tell all of them to become invisible too. So we don't want our capsule to be invisible, but our sort of character's legs and stuff to still be visible. So let's pull that out. So there we go. So we've made this invisible. Now at some point we're going to want to repossess our character and become visible again. So while we're here, what we can do is we can just select all of these. Now I'm going to hit Control and click on this unpossessed because we don't want to copy that. Hit Control and D to duplicate. Control and C and Control V to copy and paste also works, but Control D is a bit easier. And what we're going to do is we're going to go from here and we're going to say event possessed. So when we do take possession of our character again, let's change these. But this time we want our visibility to be true or visible, and our response, or our collision response, to block, which is its default value. So when we become the character again, we can still see and run into stuff. Now, obviously, when we possess the player character, we're also going to want to change our mapping back. So we can do exactly the same. Now, if you want to be a little bit lazy, what we can do is go back to our vehicle pawn, and we can effectively copy all of these parts. So Control C, let's copy those. We're just going to paste them in here. And let's just plug this in. So plug that in there, like that. And that should be fine. Let's just move these up, make it look a bit more neat and tidy. However, this time we want to reverse this around. So we want to remove the vehicle mapping, and we want to re-enable the characters mapping. And that should be alright. So although we've not set it up to repossess the player yet, let's just make sure that our character disappears when we get in the car. So we get in the car, and obviously my character would have been around here. Oh, I crashed into something, so something's still there. Was that a bit of a glitch, or... Okay, I feel like that might have just been a bit of a bug. Whatever was there doesn't seem to be there anymore, so we'll leave that for now. If you have any issues with you still colliding with something, let me know and I'll have a look into that. I'm not going to assume that was just for me, but we'll look into that if that happens to be a problem. But so far our character disappears and we can't crash into it, it appears. So now we need to set up the key to get out of the vehicle. So go back to our vehicle. Now again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the E key. So when we press the E key and keyboard, when we press the E key, we actually want to repossess the player, or the driver in this instance. So we're going to need a reference to our player controller again. So get player controller, and we want to possess something new. Now obviously we're going to need a reference to the character that got into the vehicle. So where we're going to get that reference from? Now obviously at this point we're getting the player's reference, but this is just the character class, and then we're getting into the vehicle. So what I think might be a good idea, just before we possess the vehicle and become the car to drive around, what we should do is let's get the player character, which returns a pawn. And let's just promote this to a variable. Call that driver. Let's plug that in. Hit compile. So that's now loaded. So when we get into the car, our driver is going to be assigned to this. So what we can do now is we can use our driver reference to become the player again. Let's just make sure we're not missing any steps. So we get in the vehicle, we tell the drive car to run, or the event to trigger. We get a reference to our driver, we possess the vehicle, we change the key bindings, and then hopefully when we press the E key again, we then possess the player. When we possess the player, we reset the visibility in the trace and put the mappings back. So hopefully if we press play now, and let's just have a quick test, hit E, we're going to drive around, we're going to stop, we're going to press the E key again, and we're out of the vehicle. Can we run around? We can run around, so that works. However, obviously we've now spawned exactly where we got in the vehicle. So let's set up that that transform. So back to the advanced vehicle, and should we set up the transform before we possess or after we possess? Let's just have a little look. Let's test this out. So we want to get the player reference, and we want to say set actor transform. There we go, set actor transform. Let's plug that in. Now the reason that we're picking transform rather than rotation is because our exit point has all of them. So we've got a location, a rotation, and all that. So what we're going to do is we're going to say get our exit point, and we want to get its world transform. We don't want to get the relative transform, we don't want to get the relative transform, because if you can see, the scale of this is 0.4 in comparison to our collision box, which it's a child of. Its location's -10. That'll just be a bit messy. So if we get the world transform, that's where it is physically in the world, and let's plug that in. So hit compile, let's play it, and let's give this a shot. I'm going to drive over here, and then if I hit E, we then get out next to the vehicle. And I kind of knew that scale was going to be an issue, because you can see that it's actually made my character an unusual shape. Now, I don't remember changing the scale of this. I might have done it by accident, but your scale should be one all the way across. Let's just try that again. Move forward, hit E, and now I'm not paper thin. So I must have accidentally typed that in. If you noticed that, well done. Pop a comment down below if you noticed me do that. I didn't notice myself doing that, but that was quite entertaining. But we can now get in and out of the vehicle. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much it. However, we're 30 minutes in, so what I'm probably going to do is just make this a little bit nicer, and I'm going to add in the UI elements, so then you've got your mile per hour on the screen, and stuff like that. This is going to take a little bit more work, so we've covered the basics of the title of the video, is how to get in and out of a car. And then just as some bonus material, if you're interested, stick around and we'll make the heads-up display work. So we've got some speed readouts, and if we've got time, I'll get the brake lights to work. As I said, adding this pack to an existing project, all the functionality doesn't work straight out of the gate, but we can get it to work. So, bonus material. Let's get the UI to update when we get into the vehicle. So the reason it doesn't work is because if we go to the vehicle template, go to blueprints, and go to the vehicle controller, which obviously we're using the third person controller and just manipulating the controls to say, right, now you're in a car, use these keys, and now you're running around, use these keys. Typically the vehicle controller that comes with the kit does all that for you. So as you can see here, when the controller runs, it's saying please use this vehicle context, and this is how it works. But similarly as well, it's also saying here's the vehicle's UI, add that to the screen. Now, because we're not using the controller, this never functions, but what we can do is we can just simply copy these three nodes. So create widget, set widget, and add to viewport. Let's go to our vehicle pawn, and let's say, well, when we possess this vehicle, as well as changing the mappings, let's also create a HUD widget. So let's just add that in. If you hit compile, you'll get some complaints. This variable doesn't exist inside this blueprint, so what you can do is next to the word set, if you right click, you can say create this vehicle HUD variable for us. So we press that, hit compile. Because that's created this variable for us, this now no longer complains because that variable exists. So we're creating the widget, saving that widget we've created as a variable, and then we're saying add that to the HUD. The reason you want to set it as a variable, just for bonus content, is if we ever want to manipulate the data that's displayed on the HUD, such as the speed and stuff like that, we can do with that reference, which is going to be helpful. So yeah. Now, obviously, when we've possessed the vehicle, we want to create this sort of heads-up display to show our speed. But obviously, when we go back to our character, we don't want to display the speed on the screen. So this is where our unpossessed is going to come into play for the vehicle. So event unpossessed, as you can see here, we effectively want to say this vehicle HUD that we created, let's just remove this from its parent. So let's just remove that, and let's just give that a quick test. Now the numbers on the screen are not going to work just yet, and actually they shouldn't be visible straight away. Let's just see what mistakes I've made here. Let's have a look. So this event possessed shouldn't run to start with, which is peculiar. Event called when the pawn is possessed by a controller and is only controlled when it is possessed. So the fact that that's being created straight away is actually a little bit unusual for me. That's a little bit bizarre. So it definitely does remove. Why is this calling straight away? That's actually okay. I don't really want to bug fix in this video. I don't want to extend this out for another 10 minutes while I figure out why that's running straight away. Because that's definitely none. So without this running, that can't exist, which is confusing me a little bit. But there's just a sort of a bug fix in the short term. I'm just going to set up a quick variable. So I'm going to add a boolean. HUD active or enabled. Okay, so with the HUD enabled boolean, which is obviously just a little bit of a bug catch in this instance, I'm going to set this to enabled here. And I'm going to just put a quick branch just here, to be honest. Branch. Now this is either going to work or this is, if it's true, do that. Yeah, this is either going to work exactly the same as it was just a second, or it's going to capture it. Okay, see what I mean? That's unusual. Because, oh, I see. Right. See, that's really unusual to me because this possessed shouldn't function straight away, but for whatever reason it was doing, but it's now preventing this from being created because of this little widget. I will look into that. I'm not too sure why this is triggering, even though it's not being possessed, because it's supposed to only be called when this blueprint is possessed, or this character, this pawn, this car, but for whatever reason it was triggering that. One other thing I'm going to do is, if you want to change it to miles per hour or leave it as kilometers, you can either tick or untick that. I'm in the UK, so I'm going to pick mile per hour. You can see when we get in the car. Oh, so that's really annoying. That even... I keep going back to that one. That even that didn't work then. Okay, there's definitely a... I'm going to pause for a second and I'm going to look into this a little bit deeper. Okay, so I just had a little bit of a play around and I couldn't actually find a real reason why it's calling. But I did manage to find a way to fix it a bit better than using this branch. So I've removed this branch if the HUD's enabled from here, so you can remove that. So we can pop that back over there. Actually, in just a sec, we're going to put something else here instead. But what actually fixes it better is I feel like this is causing us a bit of a bug. I can't really explain it, but effectively if we put an is valid node here to check whether this import enhanced subsystem is valid, so this should return false until we actually possess this widget, this pawn, this vehicle. So this should return false at all times, meaning that none of this would ever run. So only when we possess the vehicle does this trigger, which causes the rest of this to be true. So that actually catches it. And what it also does, it prevents this from triggering prematurely as well. So we shouldn't get them errors at the end anymore, which is absolutely fine for us. So we'll put the is valid in here like that. But what we'll actually do as well is we'll move this HUD enabled and we'll move that over here. So just before we display the HUD on the screen, that's exactly when we are saying the HUD's enabled, create it and add it to the screen. Now, obviously when we remove it from the screen as well, we probably want to set this to false. So let's just copy that is the HUD enabled, set it to false, and then we'll connect this here. And if we press compile and play it now, you can see the HUD isn't active on the screen. When we get in the vehicle, it then adds it to the screen. So I'll be honest, okay, so that shouldn't be there, to be honest. Vehicle HUD, that doesn't exist. So what we'll do is we'll just add another is valid. So from that, is valid. So only if the HUD is valid can this function. What's interesting is on the original build that I made for the example, I didn't run into any of these issues, so something's obviously slightly different in this model, but it is probably better practice to put is valid nodes in when you've got references like this anyway, because it just prevents bugs from like that from happening. So if we press play now, go to our vehicle and then exit, you can see we don't have that error anymore. So that has made me lose track a little bit, but we've got the HUD displaying on the screen. However, the information on the HUD doesn't function. So what we want to do is we want to go back to our vehicle controller. And there is also a little bit of a script here that says every tick, get the vehicle's speed and update the UI. So we want to also copy this. So Control C. Go back to our advanced vehicle pawn. Now, if we go and say, let's put this on tick, it'll fly us back up to the top here because the tick's already been added to this blueprint. But what we can do is we can just put this at the end. So let's just add that to the end and plug that into there like that. Let me just level this up. Let's just move all that up. And now, obviously, right when we possess the vehicle, that's the only time we want to update the speed. And if we press play now, to be honest, this won't work because there won't be a HUD on the screen to update, but this will continue to run anyway. So let's just add a branch in here. Let's get our HUD enabled, get that. So we only want this to update the speed when there is a HUD actually visible. So we'll do a branch to check that. So only when there is a HUD to actually update do we want to update the speed. If we hit compile, we've also got these errors because this vehicle movement component variable doesn't exist. Now, because the player controller actually gets a reference to our vehicle component and then sets it, that's where this reference comes from. But because we are actually in the vehicle itself, we can just get a direct reference to it. So let's just delete both of these. And here you can see the vehicle component here. Let's just plug this straight in. So we'll plug that in there. And we'll drag one more and plug that into there. So now if we hit compile, we shouldn't get any more complaints. And we shouldn't get any bugs because we're saying only update the speed and change the speed on the screen when the heads-up display is enabled. So let's hit play. Let's possess our vehicle. So now we can see the speed is no longer 99, but when we drive, this now updates correctly. And if we slow down, you can see that the gears are updated. Now I can't get into gear 2 because there's not enough space for me to get that much speed, but that should work. And we've not got any bugs, so that's very nice. So we've added the HUD to the screen and we've updated the speed with how fast the vehicle's going. So looking at the time, we've got 46 minutes. I guess I could make this up to an hour. So let's quickly try and fly through the brake lights. So the brake lights, how do they work? Now, you might have noticed up at the top we've got this function called brake lights. Now, in the original template, there's a background function which runs and does that for us. Now, because it's not come pre-set up, because not everything is when you add it, we've got this function that's completely empty. Now, the way it works is a bit... It's pretty decent actually. It's nice. Let me just explain it. So, if we go back to the vehicle template, go back to content, sorry. If we go to vehicles and sports car, we've got materials. And one of the materials is the MI, which is a material instance, sports car chassis. And if we open that up, you'll see this ball, which is a complete mess. But effectively, if I go to plain view, these are all the parts of the vehicle. So you can see here we've got these red lights and we've got some bright white lights here. These are actually the brakes and the headlights. Now, obviously, this just looks a mess, but there's a UV map which tells this material where to put each of these parts on the screen. But as you can see here over on the right, because this is a material instance, that means some of the information which makes this material visible are being controlled by parameters, and we can adjust them with it being a material instance. I don't want to get too much into that, but effectively, because some of these parameters have already been set up for us, you can see here brake light power. If I move this up and down, if you just watch this red light, if I change the power of the light, you can see that them brake lights are now getting brighter. So what we can do is we can say let's every time we press the brake button, let's make this brake power stronger, which makes our lights appear to be acting as brake lights. Now, you could also, if you want to, you could adjust the headlights. In some other instances, like if you want to flash your lights, you'll have to set that up yourself, but you can see here that the lights on the vehicle are also a part of this. So let me just reset that. I think that was actually 80, weren't it? So 80. So let me just close this. So this is MI Sports Chassis. Let's just close that. And I'm going to go back to my vehicle and we're in the brake light function. If you can't see this up at the top, down here underneath functions, you'll see brake lights. And then we can continue from there. So what we need to do is we need to create a dynamic material instance. and the parent is going to be our mi underscore, I think it was sport, was it? Yep, so sport car chassis. Yep, so that means we're going to create this material. We want to then set this as the material for our mesh. Hit compile. So let's create that, set it as the material, but then what we want to do is we want to set a scalar parameter value. So let's plug that in. And actually what we want to do is we want to set up a branch, because we want to say if we're breaking is true, which luckily this node comes with are we breaking built in. If it's true, let's set the value to like 100, and if it's not, let's set it to 4, which is its default, and that'll give us the appearance of breaking. So let's just drag off is breaking. Let's do a branch. Let's connect that up here, plug that in. If breaking is true, we want to set our value to, let's say, 200. And if we're false, let's just duplicate this node and save some time. If we're false, we will set that to 4, which is the default. Don't forget to set your target on this as well, back to your return value. And if you want to make this look a bit prettier, what you could do actually is, whoops, put that like that. And instead of having 2 blue lines, because this is the same value, you can just plug that into there like that. And in that case, we can now delete that one. I'm wasting time here by making this look prettier, but I can't help it. So I'm just going to do the same for brake light as well. Put that there for this branch and make another one there like that, just to make it look a bit cleaner. So the only thing left that I think we need to do is let's change this parameter name. So typically I've closed that chassis material. Let's just press this magnifying glass and that should take us straight to it. Let's open that up. And what's it called? Brake light power, with capital letters for each one. So brake light power. I'm going to copy that, paste it in there, and hit compile. So I just want to make sure that this brake light function is actually being called somewhere in the event graph. So I'm going to look for braking, steering and throttle, braking controls. So here we can see when our brakes pressed, this brake lights event is triggered, which would cause this to run. So let's hit compile and let's hit play and let's just make sure that works. So if I hit space, our brake lights are now coming up, and if I hit reverse, the lights also come up. So that's it. 50 minutes, that's not too bad at all. So Lee, I hope this was of massive help to you. There's quite a lot of features in here, and obviously to everybody else, I hope this was a valuable video. If it was, please consider giving this video a like. If you like this content and you want to see more stuff like it, please browse the channel or even consider subscribing so you don't miss any future videos. If you want to be notified when I do post a video, hit the little bell icon next to the subscribe button and that'll notify you when I do release a video. My recent schedule's been a little bit weird. I kind of just release a video when I get an opportunity to. And yeah, if you want to support me as well, I've got channel memberships. That's quite cheap, to be honest. It's about the price of a coffee. That really helps me out and gives me a bit more incentive to keep publishing. And if you want to chat with me, like I said, feel free to leave a comment. But also in the description, there's links to my Discord channel. There's quite a few of us now. We're all a great bunch. If you've got any questions, chuck them down in the Discord. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you in a future video. So thanks for watching this one, and I'll see you in the future. Thank you.